So with that, what I want to do is start by introducing our panel today. When you, excuse me, sorry about that. So our panel today is really quite a group of esteemed fleet professionals. Combined, we've got over 100 years of fleet experience. First up today will be Sam Pant. Sam is the Technical Services Manager for the State of Colorado Department of Personnel and Administration. Sam's been in the fleet world for, about 16 years. Next after Sam will be Steve Minter. Steve's the branch manager at Kentucky Department of Agriculture. And again, he's another longtime fleet person, having, 26 years plus in the fleet business. On the Agile side, Ron Katz is our Senior Director of National Accounts. Ron's been actively involved in NCSA for, a number of years, including past president, and also, like myself, a longtime fleet person. And, I'm Joe Posnick, and, my role in Agile is to work with our clients and helping them get the most out of our integrated solutions. So with that, I just want to say welcome and thank you everybody for allowing us to present today. So today's agenda is going to be in two parts. So the first part of it will be, discussing state fleet challenges and successes. I'm going to cover a first point, and that is, looking at and discussing essential parts of a motor pool in the fleet business. After that, I'll introduce Sam. Sam will talk to the state of Colorado and some of their how their program is structured and, some of the successes that they've been able to enjoy. And then we'll get on to Steve Minter from Kentucky Department of Agriculture, and Steve will also talk about Kentucky's program. The next part of this will be really helping you better understand how you can approach this in your own business. And with that, Ron's going to come in and talk about various components of, the motor pool. How do you calculate ROI? Where do you start? And some of the common things that we all face when we get into doing this. And that is dealing with objections. A lot of folks don't like to share their vehicles. It's near and dear to their heart, but there are always good reasons to do it, efficiency and cost being two. And Ron's going to help you better understand some of those. Okay. So, the first thing that we get into is, I'm always fascinated, when you get and talk to fleets and start deconstructing how everybody's different. We all operate different types of fleets, but the surprising thing is that as we think about challenges, they're all pretty much the same. If you were to go into a room of fleet professionals and you start tossing, asking questions about centralization or automation or standardization or streamlining, it'll invoke a great conversation, about how folks do it for their specific business and the pros and cons of it. But fundamentally, when you think about the fleet business and some of the things that we try and achieve at the end of the day, there are a lot of common themes that do deal with things like centralization or decentralization of the fleet, communication, automation, how to streamline it, how to standardize your process, how to integrate your activity, the importance of driver satisfaction, in overall efficiency. So lots of common threads that are germane to everybody, certainly in the presentation and on our call today. Now, one of the really interesting things is that as our challenges are pretty common across fleets, the way that we can approach them tend to be fairly straightforward and can be fairly standardized. So, one of the things that we get into today with both Sam and Steve is, they're obviously, they're using Agile Fleet Commander Framework to help them manage their car sharing and motor pool activity. So, they've been able to, take their fleet and transform it to provide higher levels of efficiency and cost reduction. And those are some of the real key challenges and successes that we want to talk about today. Certainly when you think about, 2020 and the year of the pandemic, I'll bet, that a lot of the fleets, on the call today are looking out at the parking lot and saying, gee, there's a lot of inventory sitting there. And, by taking a step back and thinking about your fleet differently and embracing, sharing certainly, It can help you, more effectively use your existing vehicle fleets, reduce your fleet in a great many cases, and save some money. So hopefully we'll get into a little bit of all of those things. The first part of really kind of getting into this is, especially on the motor pool and sharing side, is making it easy for folks to use a system or to have a process where you can leverage it and integrate technology. We're kind of in the way where everything wants to be self-service today. And different fleets have different operating models. Some may have, kind of a combined model. Some may have a direct, self-service model. But fundamentally, coordinating use and scheduling available inventory is number one in any process. So you always want to make sure that your drivers have visibility to what your inventory is, so that they have pretty much 24/7 access to it. There's no need to have paper. There's no need to have, kind of manual process. And by streamlining and automating this, you're able to really eliminate spreadsheets and emails and all the things that take administrative time and just add significant burdens to you running an efficient organization. The next piece is, when you think about, once a person gets comfortable and you're able to see inventory and schedule vehicles, it's being able to effectively dispatch, and manage your keys. Certainly one of the biggest problems and challenges today in any fleet, that tries to share a vehicle is who has the key? Where did the key go? And, we see on a very regular basis where folks have a manual operation. Keys get lost with, great regularity. You think about the new coded keys in a vehicle, you're looking at a couple, $300 a key. So it doesn't take long before the cost of keys add up into, real money, as we like to say. So having a process where you can integrate reservations and vehicles, and then dispatch your keys, either using, some combination of staffing or kiosk only methods or a centralized integrated, kind of disbursement method, certainly helps you better manage your inventory and the responsibility of the asset. As we like to say, it's as easy as, if not easier than getting a boarding pass at the airport. So again, it's all self-service. The other nice thing about this is that when you think about, COVID and the pandemic, one of the things that, automated systems help to do is really provide that contactless access. And so by having systems in place, you're able to leverage the technology to provide your service even when, there may be constraints around, human intervention and human contact. So again, it provides that additional level of flexibility for the organization to help keep your operations, running along. Now, having a nice way to make reservations and obviously dispatching keys in and out, those are two critical elements of the process. But, by having an integrated solution at the end of the day, really what you end up with is accurate and effective utilization. So because you're running an automated process that's tightly integrated, you're able to clearly understand, how your assets are being used, where your assets are being used. So you can start making those choices around, do I have the right kind of vehicles in place? How are they being used? What are my high utilization vehicles? What are my low utilization vehicles? And these are real critical aspects to you balancing your fleet and determining what your right inventory is. Like any operation, the goal is, the right asset in the right place at the right time. And that's what you get, by using an integrated system like, certainly Fleet Commander. The other nice thing is that as you start thinking about your utilization, you're able to then start saying not only by the vehicle, but also by your locations. So, in times like a pandemic where you've got spotty utilization, you can make some decisions about how your assets are being used, where your assets are being used, and all of these things, certainly build upon each other so that you're able to then leverage the organization's assets to operate more efficiently. So it's a building process, for the organization and for you to effectively look at, what your staffing and what your vehicle needs to be. You know, the next piece of this is making it easier. So even though you've got, you know, potentially automation in place, and you're dispatching keys, and you're getting great data out of the solution, you still need a way where you can easily look at what's going on. At a glance is really important in terms of running an effective, you know, motor pool and certainly car sharing infrastructure. You know, as you start thinking about it, you want to know what's leaving, you want to know what's coming back. And again, thinking about, you know, kind of a nice, concise dashboard, you're really able to see all of these nice discrete aspects of it so that you can see, you know, what's on tap for today, walk in the morning, or even, you know, looking at it from home. Because again, the application's cloud-based, so it doesn't matter where you access it, you always see the same level of information. It's updated real time. So again, it helps you better understand what's going on in your business today, both from a dispatch standpoint, from a return standpoint, and then, you know, any potential issues that you may have. So when you look at motor pool activity, you know, you can see, and again, depending on how your fleet is, you know, operate, you can see whether or not, you know, people are changing requests, canceling requests, whether they're late, whether they're for pickup or return, if you've got vehicles that are being inspected. And again, these are all important aspects to running an effective fleet. You know, one of the things that, you know, from an Agile standpoint, you know, we embraced a lot of the challenges of the pandemic this year. And again, put some significant guidance out there around how people can use the system to work for them. So whether or not it's considering, you know, adding more time between, you know, vehicle usage to allow for, you know, deeper cleaning of those assets, to putting in dedicated checklists. These are all things that you can, you know, that a good system will help you, you know, solve from a problem standpoint while delivering the efficiencies that you need to optimize your fleet. And then, you know, the most important thing is that looking at your capacity versus demand. Always a real critical aspect. And again, you know, when we talk about right vehicle, right place, right time, you know, this is kind of helping us, you know, make good decisions about what we think our capacity is versus what our demand is. And, you know, obviously when we start thinking about things like the kind of vehicles that we have, you know, when you look about, you know, the hourly utilization, you can see vehicle availability based on specific types. So again, it's meant to help drive decision-making around the fleet and around how you need to more effectively structure your assets and position your assets to meet your ongoing demand within your organizations, okay? So, you know, fairly straightforward from that standpoint, but again, it's a process in terms of putting this together. You know, the next piece of this is I want to introduce Sam to you. So Sam, again, is the Technical Services Manager with the State of Colorado Department of Personnel Administration. And what Sam's going to do is he's going to walk you through State of Colorado DPA and what they've done and how they've approached this. So Sam, with that, I'll leave it to you.
Thanks, Joe. So State of Colorado, we had few challenges. So we needed to streamline the reservation, manage vehicle scheduling, dispatching, and reporting. So with that, you know, we needed to cut back on our paper use and, you know, bunch of spreadsheets, and there was no transparency at all. So with that, we needed to have the motor pool located where which would help us drive demand and driver satisfaction as well. The other challenge we had was right-sizing the fleet so that, you know, a robust utilization data would help us right-size the fleet so that it would help meet us demands of the vehicle as well. Also, we needed to comply and ensure that we were on the correct path to achieve our green fleet goals. Next slide, please. So with that, with that approach, we had the automation helped us, right size the fleet. So as you can see, we started out with 60 vehicles. We were able to reduce that by approximately 30% to 44 vehicles. Soon that we could see the opportunities of savings right away. As you can see, the number that we saved around $360,000, in avoiding to purchase additional vehicles. Past billing methods, there are a lot of paper involved, a lot of spreadsheets that drastically cut back. Now, based on my personal experience, all you have to do is put in the dates, and it automatically gives you the billing. So, also the online reservations, it has helped us build a better workflow internally and our team, and externally for the users as well. Next slide, please. So the success we have had with I would say Motorpool and Agile is, we're able to right size the vehicle and the inventories as well. So as you saw earlier, from 60 to 44, and the billing was automated. So like I said, it takes us literally 5 minutes to pull out billing from the system. Online reservations 24/7. It's via web-based system. So this pretty much avoids, it's pretty much contactless process. So it reduces unnecessary touch points when you're doing the reservation as well, or getting the vehicle. With the use of Motorpool, we have saved around $130,000 in 2019, based on data we have received from external vehicle rental companies as well as our Motorpool. Even with the slowdown due to the pandemic in 2020, we were able to save upwards of $50,000. So you can see the results right there. So with the automation, the staff can now focus on other duties, other core cross-functional areas within our department as well. Also, we have been able to right size based on the data we have, right size as well as diversify the fleet, and added electric vehicles in the mix. This has definitely contributed to us becoming one of the few sustainable fleets in the nation. So, this picture we have is our temperature controlled self-service motor pool that's located outside. And right behind it is our garage where, you can just pass the keys there and they can go inside the garage, and grab the vehicle and go. So we have, based on the data we have, understood where the efficiencies are, and realized in the process of moving to a motor pool, based on like dispatching, it's pretty much automated. So, and we're able to market motor pool availability with as wide a net as possible because of the accessibility and the ease of use, I would say. And it's a continually developing process. We have, with the partnership with Agile, we have trainings, and it allows us to learn more about motor pool application as well.
Sam, that's great. I mean, I think as you look at, the state of Colorado and some of the successes that you've been able to enjoy, certainly, streamlining your activity has provided lots of different benefits to the state and to your organization directly, both in terms of indirect costs, inefficiencies from, staff creating billing to managing a system, focusing on core activities, to direct savings where, you've been able to, save hundreds of thousands, certainly over $500,000 in combined costs, by avoiding the purchase of new vehicles, as well as then offsetting external market rentals. So that's a great story, Sam. Congratulations on a job well done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. With that, what I'd like to do next is I'd like to bring Steve Minter and introduce him. So as I mentioned at the beginning, Steve is the branch manager of Kentucky Department of Agriculture, and Steve is responsible for all KDA vehicles, across the state. Steve?
Hello. Again, my name is Steve Minter. I'm with the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. I've been here for about 14 years now. We've come a long way with our fleet in that time. We've been a partner with Agile Fleet now for 14 years as well. So we've been able to grow together some, I guess you could say. Our fleet has changed drastically, and it's been largely because we were able to get a good glimpse at that usage data, the effectiveness of the vehicle itself, how we're able to utilize that tool. And I think, as you'll see through our presentation, agriculture has a diverse mission. We have a plan on how we're going to carry that out. So we are located in Frankfort, Kentucky. Our fleet size is 156 vehicles today. 14 years ago, that was 195 vehicles. We have a motor pool reservation system as well that we never have really just jumped into the frying pan when it comes to developing our motor pool. We did about a 6-month study on how combining our pool from multiple locations into one would affect our logistics and how that would affect our drivers and employees, And so we started with about 31 vehicles assigned in our central office location in Frankfort. And once we got all that combined and moved into a central location, that's where we developed our 31 vehicles. And through our 6-month study, we realized that we were top heavy now that we were sharing vehicles. So when we started using the motor pool tool through Fleet Commander or Agile Fleet, we were able to really see that sharing develop, and how instead of maybe a vehicle being tied up for a complete day, they're able to be utilized on an hourly basis. So we have now today 14 shared vehicles in Frankfort with almost a 10-to-1 sharing ratio for our staff. So, and a lot of states are not broke out like Kentucky. We've got 120 counties within our state. So that makes a little bit of our disbursement of our fleet a challenge to really figure out how we're going to locate these vehicles geographically, and that's been something to learn as well. Next slide there, please. This can give you a little glimpse of our mission here at Agriculture. We affect or touch the lives of every individual, every Kentuckian, every day in something that we do. We look at everything from eggs to amusement rides. And our staff is largely employed as field staff. They don't report to a singular office. Their home is their work location, and they head about their duties every day when they leave their home. So that presented a challenge for our fleet as well, and how we were going to move forward with right sizing. There's while we have a very diverse mission, we really wanted to look at how we could streamline the numbers of vehicles we were purchasing and the types of vehicles we were purchasing. I think in future slides, we'll touch on that a little bit too. Next slide, please. So this is just a little glimpse into what we're really streamlining into. Now, while we have some heavier trucks, most of our trucks are 3/4 tons, and most of our vehicles, instead of buying cars and things like that, it's we've moved into a compact SUV. Now, the trailer you see below there, it's something that we're pretty proud of. That's a mobile science activity trailer, and now that's actually pulled with a larger truck, a 2-ton truck actually. And we have 3 of those that cover the state, and they travel around and we teach elementary school age children about agriculture in the state and how that applies to their everyday life. So we're not just driving cars; we have a diverse need as well. Next slide, please. So upon arriving at Fleet Department of Agriculture to run their fleet, walking in the door, we had no formal fleet management program. I was pretty much handed an Excel spreadsheet that said, "Here's our inventory." We had no sharing, no tool to track that sharing or to manage that sharing. We had no utilization data. And one big thing I looked at when I first came was to study how much personal usage we were experiencing. So when one of our employees drives their personal vehicle in the event of carrying out their everyday work, they get to turn that in on their per diem. So the year that I came in 2007, we had spent $200,000 reimbursing for personal vehicle usage. We had no technology to track our trips, and we knew up front that we were very heavy on our vehicle assignments in the central office location. Next slide, please. So here's where we started to experience some of our challenges, and where we were looking at our data. And the first glimpse of usage that we were able to really get our hands on and study came from our fuel usage file. Every month, our fuel provider would give us or have a report available for us to download the fuel usage for the month, and we were able to put together how much usage was occurring, and it helped us to start to identify what types of vehicles were desirable and what types weren't. And in a lot of cases, a fleet looks at purchasing smaller is better. 2-wheel drive is less, but there are certain costs that come with downsizing your fleet or right sizing. And we were very heavy on 2-wheel drive vehicles. We had a lot of half-ton trucks, compact trucks that just weren't meeting the need of our employee and what they were set out to do. And you see there that mindset. That was actually said at one point that it was cheaper to pull them out of the mud the one time a year that they got stuck than it was to actually buy them a 4-wheel drive. But we've since proved that that's not entirely true. Next slide, please. So again, the way our fleet is dispersed throughout the state, through the 120 counties, most of those vehicles are assigned to a particular employees. They will drive that vehicle from cradle to grave. They work from their home, and so that doesn't necessarily lend us to be able to make large reductions statewide. So we had to look centrally at those large numbers of vehicles that we had that were not being utilized. And with that fuel data, we could see that those half-ton and compact size trucks were not getting utilized, as were the cars. You know, we are the Department of Agriculture, and as you can imagine, we find ourselves on farms and in lots of areas that gravel or asphalt may not be available. So we were we pretty well got our vehicles down as far as types to where we utilize 3/4 ton trucks, both 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive. We identify employees that have to be out no matter what. Then instead of purchasing cars and things along that lines, we stick with the 4-wheel drive compact SUV. Now, with pretty much only having 3 vehicle types, we don't have to worry about moving vehicles around our fleet to take advantage of lesser used vehicles. We can move those into higher usage areas, and we can roll our fleet around and try to keep our usage consistent across the fleet instead of having a spike in a few vehicles here and there that get excessive mileage. So we worked to minimize our assigned vehicles at our central location. Our motor pool, when we first started, like I said, we started with 31 vehicles. Once we partnered with Agile Fleet to manage our motor pool, we started with 19 vehicles. And so right off the bat, we decreased our fleet by 12 once we started with that. And since we were able to really start tracking that usage and our per trip usage, we've reduced that further to 14. And we feel pretty comfortable at 14 right now, that with roughly 150 users in our database, we're still not seeing any times where our employees are going without, and we're still not seeing an increase in any personal vehicle usage. So one other thing that I'd like to point out, during this COVID outbreak, having the kiosk set up has been instrumental to the department to be able to comply with the CDC guidelines on the COVID outbreak. It set us up for success before we even knew we needed it. So as it works today, there's virtually no interaction. Really, there is no interaction face-to-face with an employee to check out a vehicle for the day or maybe just for a trip across town. And we decided early on also that putting GPSs in our vehicles would give us some pretty crucial information as well. We'll touch a little on that later on our slides as well, how that's really come to play and helped us out. Next slide, please. So here's a little picture of our kiosk. It sits in our lobby at the front office. All the employees have a card to get in and out of the building, and that card also is what logs them in to the kiosk. They just wave it in front of the scanner there, and away they go. They're able to check out a grab and go for an impromptu trip that maybe they just need to run to the post office or go across town. Or they can sit right at their desk and plan their entire month, maybe 6 months. They can reserve their vehicles and make their plan as far out as they need to. So it's really helped us out with the COVID issue and with financial. I mean, as you can imagine, we're all fleet administrators here. That if you can reduce the size of your fleet, you're saving your organization tremendous amounts of money. Next slide, please. All right, so again, we're all fleet administrators here. We've all been asked to do more with less, And I feel like the Department of Agriculture has really been able to capitalize on that. We've reduced our fleet from 195 vehicles to 156. We have virtually eliminated the personal mileage reimbursements. Now they have to make a request, and they're only approved in certain situations. And so we've virtually eliminated it, which has been a huge savings. We've been able to reduce those assigned vehicles in central locations. And now we're tracking our fuel usage on an electronic basis, which allows us to ensure that we, number one, that the vehicles that are showing up on our fuel bill, because we have to remember the entire state of Kentucky has the advantage of our fuel contract. We're just a small part of that. So we're able to check our fuel bill to make sure all the vehicles are ours. We're not paying for somebody else's. We're able to track how many gallons are purchased, and we know how many gallons a vehicle will hold, so we can make sure that we're not being charged for more than we could possibly have purchased, or that we don't have another problem taking place. And being able to manage your preventative maintenance has been another success story for the Department of Ag. You know, vehicles today are built on very tight tolerances, and those are required to get the fuel economy that the EPA requires from the manufacturers. And keeping up on your preventative maintenance is just crucial. And another area that really comes into play and into effect is something a lot of people may not consider, is that while that employee, that state employee or that organizational employee is sitting at the shop with that vehicle, they're already down. That day has changed for their total outcome. So you might as well take advantage of that and try to complete as many things at one time as you can. So we've been able to set up a preventative maintenance schedule, and as we're going through approving the repair or the maintenance on those vehicles, Agile Fleet will actually help and remind us, hey, you may need a set of wiper blades, or it's time for a tire rotation. While you have the tires off, look at those brakes. Being able to keep up with that has been a huge help and such a beneficial thing to keeping our vehicles safe on the road for our employees to drive. Next slide, please. Okay, so as anybody can understand, if you're going to try to start doing this, you've got to have support from your upper management. Without that support, you're spinning your wheels. And we've had a really good team here over the past several administrations, actually, that have agreed and understood, and we've been able to accomplish a lot. And it's critical to have support from your entire program. I think that's one of the biggest keys. If you don't have buy-in from the employees that are utilizing these vehicles on a daily basis, and you don't have buy-in from your management, your upper management, you're really going to struggle with being able to right-size your fleet, with being able to consolidate your vehicle locations. And those are critical pieces of information to gather from those people as well. So that's probably some of the biggest advice I can give you. Also, it's never too late or too early to start looking at your usage data in some form or fashion. Your technology will come as you learn more about what you're looking at. The technology will fall into place, and it will make more sense to your upper management to see the benefit of where that outlay of cash will come from to purchase your software, to develop a motor pool, or to purchase new vehicles. All of that comes into play in your decision-making process. Let's see, is that the end of my slides? Okay, no, I got a little more. So field data is what started it with us. That's how we were able to get off the ground. And once we understood what we needed, we could adjust the classes of our vehicles to really work throughout the entire fleet. And also at the end, when we're surplusing our vehicles or disposing of them, you know, our resale values have been higher because number one, our staff are happy with their vehicles. There's a sense of ownership there because they're happy with those vehicles. They care for them better. We're selling vehicles that in a lot of cases, except for just the everyday road rash and a little bit of rust, other than that, they're in great shape. So once we understood those needs, we were able to adjust those vehicles, and that's a key piece of information for any fleet. And if you can develop that sense of ownership with your end user, then the product that you're going to dispose of is only going to help you with your return on your investment. Next slide there, please. All right. So just some key ingredients that we looked at from the beginning. You know, we have 120 counties. We looked at where the fuel was being purchased geographically. We looked at how much was being purchased, how many miles were getting put on our vehicles. And once we had that information, we were also able to look at our centrally located vehicles and look at that utilization to study what we can do there to decrease our vehicles. Next slide. All right, and now again, I say we started with spreadsheets and looking at fuel usage with spreadsheets. So using our partnership with Agile Fleet has allowed us to minimize those assigned vehicles. We've developed the pool reservation system for sharing, and we're able to centralize a lot of our vehicles geographically. We have multiple offices in Franklin County. We're now on all one campus, and that led us to combine our pools. And so that helped us with being able to downsize those numbers of vehicles as well. Next slide, please.
Steve, I think that's it for you, actually. I just want to draw out a couple of points that you made, Steve. And the thing that I found really interesting was in your headquarters location, you're able to get, pretty much a 10-to-1 sharing ratio for your 14 vehicles, which is really pretty phenomenal if you think about it. That means that, if you have a 1-to-1 relationship, it means you need a vehicle for every person. And by using, a 10-to-1, you're able to accommodate, 140 people with 14 vehicles, which is just, amazing. When you think about the cost avoidance of that decision and about your process, that's a multi-million-dollar decision for the state of Kentucky, that you've been able to increase the efficiency to such a level that you didn't have to go out and buy, 126 other vehicles to provide transportation to the state employees. So really a great job. That and amongst the other things that you've done, it really just goes to show that by having a methodical approach, that you're able to really work through, all of your, objections and how to construct the program to make it the most efficient that you can. So really well done, Steve.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. With that, what I'm going to do is I'm now going to turn it over to Ron Katz. Ron is going to help, frame, part two, which is writing your success story. So, how you can approach this on your own, without a system. How do you get started? What are the things to do? So with that, Ron, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Joe. And thanks, Sam and Steve, for sharing your experiences and providing us with a terrific overview of your organization's sort of impressive accomplishments. Congrats. So as you've seen, and Joe mentioned, sort of highlighted, Colorado and Kentucky's journeys were each pretty different based on sort of where and how they started, as well as kind of the strategic and business goals they continue to work towards on a day-by-day basis. Yet both of their stories, do have some common themes. They're also different. So when you start thinking about how to craft, and define your success, before beginning any real journey of transformation, I guess I'd call it, it's always helpful to define what it is that you're trying to achieve, right, through change. So one way to accomplish this is to consider and define in really concrete terms what success looks like for you, okay? So when thinking about Sam and Steve's successes, there were a few consistent themes that they both highlighted, like automating process, like implementing sort of a structured and efficient reservation and dispatching process. And of course, automating some manual labor-intensive, processes like billing. These types of changes can really have a huge impact in terms of reductions in staff hours and improving the accuracy and timeliness of fleet data. And as there are always operational as well as, let's face it, financial considerations to keep in mind when looking to justify making any change, it's really important to document your goals and link those goals to hard numbers or project benefits or deliverables that you can hold yourself accountable to. And if you're planning on implementing new technology, whether it be something like our solution, or you want to use these goals to hold, yourself and your organization accountable, it's really important to document and define what your goals are. So you may want to choose to focus on some cost reductions that you'd accomplish by standardizing and automating, for instance, your vehicle sharing process, right? By implementing new technology or by instituting changes within your fleet, you might generate similar savings to Colorado, where they reduced the age of their fleet by almost 50%. They eliminated more than 16 vehicles from their fleet, and they continue to reap ongoing savings, which, have Steve has mentioned, or rather Sam has mentioned, that are more than $360,000 a year. Like Kentucky, you may decide to make changes to your vehicle use policies. You may reduce the number and the types of assigned vehicles to departments and drivers. You may take the opportunity to revise and sort of more effectively communicate and enforce your fleet policies that can dramatically reduce personal mileage reimbursement while generating, big improvements in vehicle usage rates. No matter your goals, it's really important to document these objectives and then link each of them to these clear, concise, and meaningful metrics, as well as what would be financial benefits, so that you can gauge and communicate to your management your achievements and those savings. Joe, if you could hit the next slide. So as you begin to think about defining the metrics and the benefits that can be generated within your business, one of the challenges that lots of fleets face is that the ability to sort of take the time to streamline process while at the same time pulling together all of the disparate and the needed data that you have in order to generate meaningful reports with accurate, and timely fleet information. As Steve and Sam related, with a centralized database or an operating system, this disparate fleet data can pretty easily be aggregated and normalized while providing some pretty labor-intensive, error-prone processes. You can eliminate those so you can reduce and lighten the load on your team, the workload, to hopefully make your team a bit more efficient. By implementing a shared motor pool environment, like our speakers discussed, you can reduce your costs all while improving the productivity and utilization of your fleet. So by integrating or linking together your fleet technology, so that might be, in Steve's case, his fuel system and his fuel data, possibly with your finance systems or your GPS systems, you can further improve access to this real-time data, to easily access data, to help you drive down costly, personal mileage reimbursement, improve the usage of your state or university-owned assets. By automatically communicating and enforcing vehicle use policy, you can ensure your equipment's being used and operated by the book, right? And with an automated system in place, that workload that you have on your team, that this burden can be dramatically reduced. so your staff can be allocated, really where they need to be and where they can be most effective to you and your organization. Who knows, you might even be able to reduce the number of staff. I know there's a person on here and a university client of ours that significantly reduced their staff by implementing technology. So there really are countless benefits that can be realized by implementing a purpose-built vehicle sharing solution. Really, the key to building a business case to justify the purchase of this type of system or convincing your internal fleet customers to give up their departmentally assigned vehicles or operate out of a shared environment is to begin the process. And that's sort of what Steve talked about. You got to begin. So as I mentioned earlier, by carefully defining what success will look like for you and your fleet, and then relating these benefits and savings to achievements that directly relate to the audience that you're trying to get approval or get funding from is really, really important to help you build your success story. Joe, if you could hit the next slide. So as Steve and Sam related, the savings that each of their organizations accomplished by implementing a fit-for-use motor pool solution were pretty dramatic. If you haven't embarked on a similar path of automating your systems, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, it can sometimes be difficult to know how to start really building a business case. Here at Agile, I think we can help. So we've got more than 2 decades of experience delivering really flexible vehicle sharing technology. And over this history, we've developed this fleet savings calculator that allows us to pretty quickly develop an accurate estimate of the expected savings you can achieve through automation. So with a pretty short discovery conversation, we can build a savings model based on your fleet's actual costs and then project the real world savings based on a variety of components, all right, from improvements in fleet utilization. It might be right sizing opportunities. It could be reductions in fixed and variable, fleet operating costs. The impact of reducing or eliminating personal mileage reimbursement, and even the expected efficiencies and savings that can be garnered by reducing the load of work on your staff. Using this ROI calculator, we can really quickly help a fleet highlight potential areas for savings, then generate an expected timeline to recoup not only the initial cost for the technology, but also the expected long-term savings that you'd garner as well. So if you're interested in learning more about this calculator, or you'd like to model these types of savings for you and your fleet, just let us know. Joe, if you'd hit the next slide, please. So if you'd like to realize sort of just some of the benefits covered by Steve and Sam today, there are clearly lots of ways to take on a project like this. But often, due to budgetary constraints or pressures, or maybe it's newly adopted mandates that, your top management or maybe even your legislature is imposing on you, some fleets may be forced to address a lot of different fleet challenges all at the same time. So, you guys are all busy. You got a lot of stuff on your plate. So it might be that you're operating out of a decentralized model where, individual agencies, departments, or operations have access to vehicles. And you need to invest in technology to sort of allow you to consolidate lots of processes and give you the tools you need for system management and oversight. We continue to work with a lot of fleets that find themselves in that situation. And our technology and our project teams are pretty adept at working with organizations that want to approach that model. However, in my experience, most of the fleets that operate in a more centralized fashion, they often have an issue with lacking investment, having to do with really providing a structured, consistent model. They might lack some skills in consistently benchmarking themselves to maintain or implement kind of those fleet best practices that people always talk about to let them operate in a sustained way. So if your goal is to put in place a system to move forward in this, it really starts with putting in place the foundation. And we tend to recommend the crawl, walk, run model, okay, where you start, simply. So in my world, I try and break things down to a few bite-sized pieces. So that's why we've got 3 components here. So really, it starts with figuring out what your goals are and taking those attributes, those goals, that we've defined, as you look at how you can define your success, and then select a system that's purpose-built to meet those initial long-term goals. Then, instead of trying to eat the whole elephant, trying to accomplish everything at once, start gradually, and select and kind of quickly focus on the base level capabilities that you need to accomplish your immediate goals. And then really focus hard on communicating with your stakeholders, not only the expected benefits of the system, so what are they going to get out of this, but also the policies and the changes that you're going to be implementing with this new technology to accomplish those goals. It's really important at the front end to effectively over-communicate what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Otherwise, you're going to get pushback. Once the base level system is really up operational and you're beginning to collect really a few key operating metrics that'll help you sort of grow the use of the system, gain traction, and bring your customers in line with what you're trying to accomplish, then at that point, it's the opportune time to move sort of over to phase 2, where you then take that data that you've collected, perhaps combine that with a fresh customer survey or fleet review, and then take that information and begin to implement sort of the next phase of the project, the next phase of the goals. So that with that data, you can begin to generate and share additional key performance indicators with your stakeholders, with your customers, and use that information to implement really further refinements to your programs and your operations. These could include things like the numbers of departmentally assigned vehicles, so taking vehicles away from departments. Maybe you want to reduce mileage reimbursement. It's all about sort of continuing the journey. And then lastly, as you continue to refine your operations, you may want to consider expanding the number of pool locations by setting up, mini pools that will allow your departments to sort of more effectively share their own vehicles. Maybe you'll initiate sort of a more structured performance-based replacement plan. Maybe implement new technologies to further streamline process. Once you've reached this stage and instilled some structure and sort of accountability within your business, there are huge opportunities to continue to define and refine your processes and really drive ongoing efficiencies on a daily, monthly, and certainly annual basis. Next slide, if you would. Of course, implementing change is never easy. You'll probably get pushback from your staff, your customers, maybe even the very same departments that you're trying to help. So with this in mind, we find it's really important to over-communicate, as I mentioned earlier, the expected benefits you plan on delivering by selecting and implementing new technology. For your staff, the selling points to change might include things like reducing, the burden on them and eliminating some labor-intensive, manual, paper-prone processes, really allowing them to focus their efforts and expertise on more meaningful tasks, right? For the fleet drivers, for your customers, they often assume that by moving to a shared use model, that vehicle availability will be, reduced. Often fleets that move to a sharing model, the opposite's actually true, and convenience and vehicle availability actually skyrockets. Frequently, when department mini pools are combined with a centralized pool, drivers then have access to even more vehicles and more varieties of vehicles that they can access whenever or wherever they might be needed. What they're probably not aware of, and frankly, oftentimes they don't really care about, is that by implementing things like local mini pools, you're really able to extract even better utilization out of the vehicles and operate with fewer vehicles for the same user community. The bottom line is really that with a bit of self-reflection, planning, and a clear and consistent communication plan, you too can really reap many of the benefits that were shared by the state of Colorado and Kentucky today. Now with that, Joe, if you could hit the next slide, I guess I'd like to open it up to any questions. I know we've got just another couple minutes here before we turn into pumpkins. So Jen, I don't know if there was any questions that were thrown into the chat box. If not,
No,
Joe, do you have anything else to add?
I do not, Ron. Great job, Sam. Great job, Steve. I think you've demonstrated some of the successes for your respective states. You've done a great work in terms of streamlining and optimizing your fleets. Congratulations, as Ron said earlier. It's really a great job and a great testament to what it means to, kind of look at utilization critically and optimize it. Oh, there is one last thing I want to mention, and that is, Ron, you had mentioned the fleet calculator, but, if you have a moment, you may want to talk about, the other calculator that we've recently created that talks about, the value of your inventory sitting in the parking lot. So we know a lot of us are, have fleets out there. We're not really using the vehicles effectively today. And surprisingly, all those vehicles have cost involved. And, Ron,
Great point, Joe. I
if you
actually
want to
should
take
have.
a minute to talk about that, that'd be great.
Sure, great point, Joe. I probably should have put an image of that in one of these PowerPoint slides. I missed that. But, obviously since, mid-March when the pandemic struck, I think pretty much all of us are realizing that you've got significant amount of assets that are sitting outside collecting dust. They might have snow on them if you're here in New England or in Colorado and other parts of the country, maybe less so. But obviously those vehicles have a cost by sitting in, by being stationary, by being idle. And one of the elements to that cost that many of our clients haven't realized is that, the cost on that is the cost that keeps on giving month after month, day after day, week after week, month after month. And with an average, operating cost of an asset on an annual basis ranging anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000 a year, it adds up pretty fast. So what we've done is we've actually created something we call a fleet waste calculator. It can be located on Agile's website. It's under the blog section that talks specifically about finding, I think finding savings under a rock of the pandemic is the blog title. And with it is a very simple calculator where you can basically put in the calculator the number of vehicles that you have, the actual current utilization rate that you're operating at, and this calculator will calculate instantaneously for you. You can do lots of what-if scenarios of what the standing cost is of that fleet at any given moment. And off the back of that calculator, what we're finding is some fleets are taking this opportunity to actually take vehicles away that might be departmentally assigned vehicles and actually remarketing them, selling them, disposing of them, and taking the savings and using that to cover some of their operating costs. The thought process is that when people do return from work or return to work after the pandemic, obviously it's going to be something that's going to take place slowly. Thank you, Sharon just posted it under the chat section for those that want it. So as they come back to work, it's obviously going to take some time. So by eliminating all of these underutilized vehicles now, the organization can take that savings and front load it. And then as people come back, if the fleet does need to add additional vehicles, well, that's the perfect time to look at what vehicle you're buying. Is it the right quality vehicle, type of vehicle? Do you want to use this opportunity to put more EVs in place? And in order to acquire those vehicles, many of our clients are looking at things that they may not have considered before, like short-term leases or long-term leases with an enterprise or an Element or someone like that. So, it isn't necessarily that as you get rid of the vehicles, you don't have to have the funds to put these vehicles back in place. You can actually, using your operating capital, put lease vehicles in place. So something worth checking out, as I mentioned, Sharon did post that to the chat box. So there's a hyperlink there to take you right to it if you want.
Well, great. I think, unless there's any questions that have come in, subsequent, we're probably good to close today. So thank you everybody for, participating. We certainly appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. And as Jennifer mentioned at the outset, the content will be posted on the NCSFA website, as well as copy of the recording. So thanks again. And Jennifer, thank you for all your help today.